All right, we are back, the three of us, and I think we're going to continue our talk on esports gambling, and then we'll finish off with some questions from you guys, Q&A style. You guys add me on Skype. My Skype ID is ChanmanV, and go ahead and message me what your questions will be, and then we'll bring you into the call when it comes time. But Richard, I think you had a few more things that you wanted to, a few more knowledge bombs you wanted to drop on us.
It was just because I'd researched the topic and then we talked about it for
he's
5
done
minutes,
work.
and I thought,
You did
yeah, I
work
was like,
for this show?
yeah, first
my
time I
God.
actually prepare, and guys don't talk about it. Like, so we're just gonna
I
drag this
definitely want to
fucking
hear more
conversation
about
out.
Oh, shit.
But anyway, no. The problem, one of the problems with esports gambling, and you're aware of this, is obviously gambling in itself isn't legal everywhere, and in particular in America, which is a big deal. I've never understood why it isn't legal, why you have to go to Vegas if you want to have a flutter, why even like betting on sports with your friends in a bar, could get you in trouble from the feds or something crazy like that. I don't know, I'm exaggerating probably. But in South Korea as well, like a lot of Asia, which I don't know if this explains kind of the cultural interest in gambling itself when you go to places like China and whatnot. It's effectively illegal. And I did some research about exactly what constitutes that illegality in South Korea, which is where StarCraft is obviously very prominent, and we can't have esports betting on Korean events localized within Korea, because obviously there would be some issues there, and certainly we've seen some even online gambling doesn't circumnavigate the laws. Article 246 of the Criminal Act in South Korea.
Wow, did he? Whoa. Did you
Sorry.
pull that out? Are you making that up, or is that for
No,
real?
this is actually true. Article 246 of the Criminal Act in South Korea states that anyone who gambles or bets for the purposes of gaining property, and money is included in that, shall be punished by a fine of up to 5 million won. And Article 247 prohibits the opening of premises for the use of gambling for a profit, and carries a punishment of imprisonment for no more than 3 years, or a fine of up to 20 million won. That's the rules in Korea about gambling. So yeah. Savior, the savior instant. But I mean, it's not that cut and dry, because you've also got unique set of circumstances in South Korea where gambling is acceptable. Like there are casinos in South Korea, and what they do is they apply different laws to the tourists as they do to South Korean citizens. So if you go to a hotel, a 5-star luxury hotel in South Korea, not abnormal to see casinos in there, but to get into them, you have to provide an international passport and prove you're not a South Korean citizen. Then it's okay for you to gamble in South Korea. So
Chris, you're muted, by the way.
slot machines are illegal outside of casinos. So you can't even, in Britain you get like fruit machines, we call them, downtown down in the pub, and we 3 lemons get £5. They're just part of our everyday culture. Buy a pint, throw £3 into a fucking fruit machine and get sniped by some dickhead who's been sat at the bar all day waiting for you to throw £3 in there so we can get that £3 out. But that's part of our gambling culture. But the long story short is, I think we do need some kind of radical cultural shifts in attitudes towards gambling, because online gambling has a lot of problems. No one's immune from it. We've seen, I think it was it Full Tilt that got FBI'd as well.
It was several of them. It was actually
Full Tilt was the bad one. They were laundering so badly.
Yeah. So, it's not even that we can say, we can get through the laws with it being online. So I think before we do this big like rah push into let's get gambling into esports, I think we need to be hyper aware about that. Globally, while us Euros might have relaxed attitudes towards gambling, certainly not everyone does. I don't know what it's like in America. It's been a long time since I've been to America. I've only been once since 9/11, and so it's a long. More. I know it's a fucking long time, but I went a few times before that in like '98 and '99. But so again, showing my age. But yeah, it was like whenever I talked about gambling over there, it was kind of, it was kind of like it wasn't under the counter type stuff, but you couldn't place a sports bet. You couldn't do it. If you had a bet.
Oh, you can do it.
It's different. Anyone can do it. We can do it. I can do it right now. I could call up and do it right now. And everyone, and a lot of people do. You set up with bookies and whatnot.
Book, yeah.
What's interesting where I'm at is I'm in Omaha, Nebraska, which is right on. Geez, I should know this, the Missouri River, right? And in Omaha is the largest city, kind of in this area, and right across the river in Iowa is Council Bluffs, which we call Council-tucky because it's kind of run down and dirty like Kentucky. Right. And
we did that. That's very close.
Just there goes the Kentucky viewers.
So yeah, the 4 that we have. So on their side of the river, and actually it used to just be on the river. You had to have a boat on the river. You can't gamble in Iowa or in Nebraska, but you can gamble on the river. It was really weird. Now they can do land-based gambling. So in Nebraska and Omaha, it's a fight every year. Like, why do we not just allow gambling here so we don't have to keep walking across the river to give our money to Iowa, right?
Yeah.
And everyone's like, can we just have gambling? But then there's a few people at the top, in the government, in the state government and things, that it's just gambling has never been allowed in Omaha, which is weird because when you think back to the days of cowboys, Omaha that's what it was a lot about, was cattle wrestling and gambling. But I think it really depends in the U.S. where you go as far as the kind of the culture behind gambling. But I mean, I literally could walk out. I can see the river from where I'm at, and I could go walk across the bridge, walk right into and start gambling, and I could be there all night if I wanted to.
Okay, well, in that case, then let me spin what we're talking about on its head. Do you think what would legitimize it would be a move away from gambling online, and then kind of having at LANs and at the tournament events themselves, a legitimate gambling area where enthusiasts can go, place a bet, watch the action unfold live at the event, and
I think that's a good way to start it, to organize it, to find where loopholes need to be closed, where there might be issues, and have, obviously in this case, you'd have to have a third party. You would not want the organizers to be a part of it, and you have a third party that's trusted. They come in and set up opportunity to do gambling if it's allowed in that state. Obviously, if MLG was to ever come to Omaha, which they should, Sundance, they ran it here, they would not be allowed to do it. But I think it would depend on the state. But I actually agree. I think that would be a very interesting addition, actually, to an event.
It would be, but just the hoops that you have to jump through, the expenses you'd have to pay just to get the license and everything.
Yeah, you can't even run crazy some events. Like we couldn't run
crazy
at Lone Star.
Maybe we move eSports events to Indian reservations or Native American reservations, I should say, because we don't
Come
call
down
them
here
Indians.
to Florida, man. There's a bunch of Seminole ones, actually.
Maybe we could do that. Like maybe that's MLG should seriously look into that. Like with a name like Sundance, anyway, he must belong to some tribe, right? Like,
gosh.
Is he Navajo or like what the fuck?
Oh man.
I'm just saying.
We're just trying to vent everybody today.
That is actually a really good idea because some of those Indian reservations have some really nice facilities. And imagine running a huge...
Well, what you don't know about those Indian reservations and casinos is that those casinos are completely taking advantage of all those Indian reservations too. So there's a whole story in itself too. So
yeah, but I mean, it wouldn't be eSports if someone wasn't getting fucking exploited. I mean, like, in many ways, like it could go hand in hand. Like,
people
eSports,
asking now
preparations for genocide together at last. Like,
What'd you say, John?
People are actually asking if they could actually bet on our show.
All right, what do you want to bet?
Well, I say one could be like, how many times does Richard touch his beard?
That's a good one.
Oh, like
that's a good one.
Set that up.
I don't know what it is, but it's like when it gets to a nice healthy growth, like like my two pussy co-hosts can't grow. When it gets to this length, you do need to kind of just keep it in. You get a bit of static off it. I think it interferes with my mic.
Oh my
So,
god. Do you actually have a beard
That's
comb
starting to
on
get a
you?
little scruffy, and you just kind of like you're just kind of grooming it a little bit,
yeah, yeah,
pushing it
yeah.
down.
But yeah,
What
we,
is it?
we should
Instead
definitely
of
have a
scratching
thing.
his balls, he gets to scratch his face. That's really what it
I'm not going for the sly finger sniff, Chris.
How
I'm
many
Oh
far,
my
times?
far
god.
better than that.
How many times does Richard say the word dick? That's another one somebody was
How many
asking.
You're
times do
so
people say the
vain, man.
word dick
So
about
vain.
me would be a much better bet. I think in chat. I want a piece of that. But anyway, so we're definitely drifting off topic again. But yeah, I definitely think there's got to be a better way to kind of present gambling to to
It's
the
not even
esports community.
It's not even presenting so much. That's the problem right now. I think we kind of touched on it in the beginning. It's just structure. I mean, we need to start putting in penalties. Putting in all those things that need to safeguard all of this and kind of continue growing it over time. We just keep adding something to it. Keep adding something to it.
Who monitors it then, Chris? Would be my question.
I mean, even right now, if it's piecemeal and it's just like tournament to tournament sort of thing, it's better than not having anything right now. Whether it's just like life bans on any players or teams that happens to, that sort of thing is like a beginning of something. But yeah, in the end, you need some kind of sanctioning body that polices all of this stuff. But you got to do something right now. There's already sites right now. There are already people making money and losing money on esports betting. So we can't just say that, whenever it becomes big, we need all these things. We actually need to start, stipulating something so at least there's some kind of prevention right now. And I don't think we have any of it. Like teams, for instance, like Jason and compLextiy, you could just say if you've ever been caught gambling and that sort of thing, you'll never be. You obviously never be on our team, and that's obviously an instant kickoff too, right?
Yeah.
Which is that's assumed by probably every single team that you'd be kicked off a team if you got caught fixing games. But tournaments need to start doing it too. And I think if you have a combination of all those things, then it'll still happen from time to time, but at least you'll eliminate some of the scenarios. But
I was just going to say, not every team. Maybe Root would try and style it out a little bit.
God, you're such.
Chris, honestly,
I think he's obsessed with.
No, see, I'm actually surprised. He's literally only said just a couple little.
Well, it's because he led with,
here.
He's just because he led with. Everybody knows. I think Paul's a dick. I mean, it's like that's kind of. You started it off. That's already like 100 times saying something about it right there. But
right. So anyway, next topic. Do we have one?
I have a question. Somebody asked.
Right.
Yeah. Let's. Why don't we start taking questions?
Okay.
And go ahead and ask that one first, Sean. And I actually have a call.
So
here.
just to preface it first, he just tuned in. He's a Call of Duty guy.
Okay.
So I reached out to some of the Call of Duty guys, and they said, "Hey, we're actually talking Call of Duty," and they're like, "What?" So they tuned in, and oddly enough, they actually do like the show.
Oddly enough, you're such a.
No, I'm just joking. They do like the show, and so he kind of missed when we touched on this a little bit, or actually when Jason touched on it, and I wanted to just like give him a high five through the screen because it's exactly what I said I think 2 weeks ago about StarCraft 2 kind of dying.
Hold that. That's this question here too about that.
Here's the question and this was in the chat, so you might have already seen it.
Oh, it's probably legit. It's from legit.
Yeah, it's from legit.
Okay,
with the current direction that esports is heading, do you feel that StarCraft 2 is dying out of the esports scene, mostly in the U.S., due to the rapid growth of League of Legends, or more currently, Call of Duty?
Okay. You want me to answer that one?
Yeah, because I've already given my feelings. I mean, what I feel. I hope that's not the case, but I do feel that way.
I think it's at a pivotal point right now, no doubt, for StarCraft 2. And as Jason and you guys alluded to earlier with WCS, it's had a negative impact on America, or at least NA and NA StarCraft up to this point. It's not that they can't fix it. They could fix it, but right now, I mean, there's no doubt about it. There are less tournaments in NA right now because of WCS. We haven't seen a SoCal tournament in a while. Like not we've maybe seen tiny college lands and that sort of thing, but we've not seen a full out GESL, right? Or even a Lone Star Clash this year. or what are some other smaller events? That Tampa one, we've seen a Tampa LAN that I kind of wanted to promote too, but just the more notable LAN events that are grassroots but are obviously big enough that people know about them, we haven't seen any yet in 2013. So that's obviously that's hurting, I think, NA StarCraft esports right now. And then just the fact that MLG only had three, or is only going to have three events this year, with StarCraft 2, that's bad. And then IPL gone now, and then NASL East is going to be taking over WCS, so they'll still be involved. But when it comes to LAN events, there's just less. So I think that, I don't know if it's going to happen in 2013, but 2014, we need to see some grassroots or attention to grassroots from Blizzard, or else we're just going to keep seeing it kind of contract a little bit. And I mean, it's still healthy. Let's not like panic or anything about it. I mean, there's still plenty of business and growth. I mean, just potential growth, and the industry is still completely legitimate. I mean, there's no doubt about it. It's just, the growth is definitely staggered for the last year. And Heart of the Swarm obviously gave a little bit of a push the last few months. But last MLG we had like 100 and something thousand people watching it, right? Whether it was because it was Flash and Life or not. This StarCraft we had less, and was it because of League and Call of Duty at the same event? I don't know, but the numbers for StarCraft were a little bit lower than last event. So we'll see what happens in the next one, but at least for StarCraft NA, it's looking just so right now, and it's pretty pivotal, and I'm hopeful. I'm always going to be pushing StarCraft 2. You guys know that. So, that's kind of my opinions on it. I don't know. What do you think, Richard?
I mean, for me, like, I think maybe it feels that way because it's an NA thing. Like, in Europe, things feel pretty, rosy. Like, I mean, not amazing, but pretty good. I mean, like, StarCraft 2 feels in a healthy. There are options. Obviously, ESL doing fantastic work, but I mean, more than that, we've got an infrastructure across Europe that allows us to, have tournaments left, right, and center. And
well, that's the thing. You have an infrastructure to do it, and that's the big difference. And WCS didn't ruin it for you guys.
Yeah, well, but hang on. Now, before we point the finger at WCS, let's just talk about North American esports in general. Now, I'm certainly no expert in this field, but I know a little bit, right? And the little bit I know tells me that, for example, when you've got people like ESEA, whose business model is very focused on one game more than others, and they're kind of coming to the party late in other games and not really doing anything to prop it up when they've got an infrastructure there to do it. They're not helping anyone but themselves by catering to the niche, and then of course they go and fuck everyone over anyway. But that's by the by. So you've had lots of money and lots of big companies in North American esports that have been able to provide tournaments and provide a kind of platform for StarCraft, but for all esports games. And generally they've failed. They've failed through ineptitude. They've failed through not expanding at the right times. They failed through over expansion. But ultimately, what's the consistent story within North American esports is pretty much boom bust. It's just boom and bust and boom and bust. And when something dies, it is annihilated. There's no vestige left behind. Yeah, it is dead. Like CPL, and that's just a name now that just gets bought by a different fucking money laundering company week in, week out. I'm just kidding, guys. Don't sue me. But you know what I mean. It's just bullshit, right? Like it doesn't exist. The CPL in any tangible form is a joke right now. And ESEA, depending on how this Bitcoin thing might go, I mean, they could go the same way. You don't know what that kind of settlement's going to be. Who knows? And CGS blew 60 mil in under 3 years. It's not like North America hasn't had the opportunities to build stuff. On the plus side, when the right people, put their mind to it, like Total Biscuit did with the Shoutcraft America recently, you get huge numbers, you get huge interest, and everyone feels pretty goddamn good about the North American scene. So, I don't think it's the end, but I don't think we should be thinking about games like detracting from it. It's just basically right now the only thing that's really working in North America is LCS, and that's about LoL, not about esports.
Well, it's, yeah, that's probably true. I mean, when it comes to StarCraft 2, there are some things that are happening that give me at least hope from the standpoint of grassroots. Is there are a lot of things in Canada that are actually happening. It just doesn't happen to be here in the U.S. But I feel like the Esports Canada group, they're doing some good things over there, and it's not necessarily getting as much publicity as it probably should be. But we're going to be having, I think, John on here, and Ken was supposed to be on here today, talking about StatDrive, and he's also president of ESC2, Esports Canada too. But they're doing a lot of good things too, and I don't know if they're doing it in tandem with Blizzard or not, or just kind of just completely on their own and just getting obviously approval to use the IP, but not actually getting any points. Not trying to be a first, second, third tier or whatever. However far it goes down. So they're doing some things. It's just the U.S. really. The U.S. there's just nothing. There's not much going on in the U.S. outside of MLG and in WCS. Right? I mean, I haven't heard anything from the Rosen brothers about test bed. You guys? I mean, I don't even know if Lone Star's gonna... Is Lone Star going to happen, John? I mean,
I think it will, but I haven't heard anything from them.
Yeah, I mean, Red Bull did.
But
something
that could
recently.
be for other reasons. But I think
Yeah.
I think actually will. I think we'll see something.
Yeah.
I know those guys are working on something. But see, that's the difference in mentality. I mean, when I've always looked at the difference between EU and North America, having gone through Quake and CS, the difference for me was the mentality. We could literally, North America could literally have 5 times the players and 5 times the tournaments going as EU, and it still wouldn't feel like we had as much going on as the EU did. Because for me, anytime I ran events for the EU community, and it's the same goes today, even in Call of Duty, oddly enough. And Call of Duty online tournaments are the hardest things in the world to run. There's no doubt about it. They're extremely difficult to run, and the community is extremely difficult to deal with. But even the EU Call of Duty community, when you ran a tournament for them, they just wanted to play. They just wanted to be there and play. And they showed up and they played their events. And look at Quake in EU. It's literally trickling into North America because it's boiling over with excitement in the EU right now. Even Quake, a dead game of 10 years, is dead. But it's not dead in the EU because they just want to play. They compete. They want to play. They want to play in tournaments. They have the smaller organizers actually get more love than the big guys. Maybe because there's not as many big events that happen there. I don't know, but somebody's saying Quake is dead. Oh, that's Odie. But it's not dead. I mean, it's not dead at all. They've been saying that for 5 years.
What is it, resting? What the fuck's
It's resting.
going on?
It's resting.
Okay.
All right. So Kurt wants to call in. Let me pull him in here.
Okay.
Good old
Our old regular caller. When's the last time he's called in? It's been a long time.
It has. It's been way, way too long.
And whose fault is that? Whose fault is that?
I don't know. You keep these guests you're having, man. They're just so. No, I'm joking. How are you guys doing?
Good, man. Good, man.
Good to hear from Richard. Good to hear from Richard, man. After all the drama, the Twitter drama, man.
Man, I fucking live for drama. Like, if I didn't
What are
have
you
no
talking
drama,
about?
like, I'd be completely irrelevant. It's the only reason Chris brought me in. He hates me. But he's like, you know what? You give me an extra 20 viewers because of your Twitter drama. So that's
It's like, what drama? There's so much drama. I don't know. No, guys. I'm glad everybody's doing well. My question is about, of course, MLG and the open bracket and things like that. MLG, I think, wants to put a hit out on me for some reason because they think I'm like constantly talking shit about them. But I want to be the first to say that I loved MLG Anaheim. I loved probably everything about it for the most part. I think it was a great event. I watched all the games as far as all the various games. I didn't watch every single game, but I watched Call of Duty some and StarCraft some and things like that. But we've heard this thing for a long time, and Chris, I think you know what I'm talking about, especially that in order to get viewers, I don't know if this was an MLG thing or if this was just a general concept from everyone or what, but we always heard that in order to get viewers, you needed a group play. You needed these top 16 players or something to play 8 or 9 times in a row.
Yeah.
You know, fuck the open bracket for at least 2 days, and then we'll start showing the open bracket. Things like that. And apparently, what we learned from this event is that's not true. Correct? I mean, supposedly this was the biggest MLG event they've had to date, both in viewership and in attendance.
But
so
wait, I mean, overall, or are you talking about for a particular, like for StarCraft or for League?
Well,
they
didn't say specific games, so that's another thing. It could be because of the fact that all the other games are doing so well that offsets something that StarCraft wasn't doing so well. I don't know. I'm just going by what they said, and they said that it was the biggest event they've had to date. Correct?
Yeah, I believe that. Mm-hmm.
So if that's true, and if StarCraft did well, and I think it did well, it didn't bust League of Legends numbers by any means. I don't think anybody expected that. Does that mean that we're going to see these formats more, where we're going to see just an open bracket? Or something? Because you know me, Chris, I'm all about that. I love the fact that it was very diverse. This event, it was incredibly diverse. You got to see QXC come out of nowhere and do well, which I think surprised a lot of people. Even though QXC isn't an unknown player by any means.
So I didn't get a chance to talk about this much when we were talking about MLG, but so the one thing that was difficult for StarCraft 2 was that there was only one stream, right? And they relied heavily on the community streams, which was great. It was great that we got to see all the matches. First off, NASL helped. That was awesome. Everybody, there's obviously a large portion of the community that love NASL, so that was really great for them. A lot of other community casters got some exposure that was probably needed for them, but it probably did affect the numbers just a little bit. I think if they would have had four of their best casters casting on 2 streams, I think overall it would have been better. But I do have to say, and I think JP was directing, right? I think JP was directing the SC2 stream, and I think he did a great job on Friday night, because Friday night generally on an open bracket or just Friday night in past MLGs, right? They just show like those group play, and it would just be meaningless games, right? They'd never show the open bracket. And what was great about this MLG is that the first 3 matches were matches that you would say, oh my gosh, it's going to be a landslide one way, so this is like terrible. But they had an entertainment factor.
Max was black versus Noni.
Max was black versus Noni. All right, come on, all right. So that's number 1. Number 2 was Coach Park's game, right? Which ended up with, we got a chance to interview Coach Park afterward. I mean, he lost to a Cannon Rush to Bubbles, which was, pretty amazing in itself. And then we got to find out Coach Park's reaction to it. That was all great stuff. And then on top of that, you saw Handreless versus Livy, right? Livy B?
Yeah.
And that was cool too. Even just, gosh, one thing I won't ever forget is Livy's smile when she did the 6 pull. Like that camera shot of that.
Is that Handreless' first time on main stage? If it's not, it's pretty damn close.
Yeah, it probably is his first time on Handreless. So getting a chance to see Henry too up there, it was amazing too. So those decisions kind of added to this entertainment factor that we've never seen in MLG, especially on Friday night. So that was really, really cool. And I think throughout the weekend, on that single stream, I think JP, whoever was making the decisions on the matches, did a great job. And the interviews were good. I mean, Polt was showing more personality than I think any of us have ever seen from him. And beyond that, probably more personality than almost every single Korean we've seen, right? With the whole thumbs down and then calling Naniwa out like in an interview and then going to try to shake his hand. I mean, that's golden right there, man.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so
yeah, I think that in the end it was like you said, I think it was a great event, and I hope that this maybe signals something in MLG's brain for a possible. And I'm not saying this was always their thing, but because they get so tired of me saying that they hate the open bracket. But that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that in general they were always about we must have a group play because a group play brings numbers and stability, and the open bracket's harder to find matches and blah blah blah. I'm hoping that this
hey.
That's just what they're saying.
The group play was always set up. We know, so that they could always make sure that the best players were always coming back.
I go specifically by what they say, because if I don't, I get bitched at. So, what they say is that. So
It wasn't just that, John. It was definitely Friday night is the toughest. Like when you have an open bracket, Friday night is the toughest night to actually have two really good players playing each other, because that first round is going to be a bunch of noobs playing good players, right?
But do you remember MLG? I think it was Providence, right?
We know there's ways to do it. Look at DreamHack.
Yeah,
I mean,
but I'm just saying.
What about MLG? What about MLG Providence? Providence had, if I'm not mistaken, they had group play, right? But they didn't have group play like the first day. And if you remember right, that's when we had a lot of open bracket matches being shown that were pretty interesting. That was the Julia versus not Coca, but someone along those lines. Anyway, it was a complete blowout.
And people gave MLG a lot of shit for that.
They did,
and that's why it happened. But the whole thing with the Julia thing is that it's kind of a fine line, and that's why I give so much props to JP or whoever chose those games, because just because they're up there, just because Maximus Black is up there, doesn't mean he's going to do anything that's entertaining, right? But you just know that Jeff is going to do something. Like he's going to type something, which he did. Like if you guys didn't watch, Noni held some one base play by Jeff, and Jeff says, you're no joke, man, or something like that. Like he typed that in game, and it was like it's hilarious, right? And then
so this just reaffirms my point that, and there's nothing wrong with it. The MLG is running a show.
Yeah,
they're running entertainment, which of course for me, being the way that I believe, I mean that's. I want the games to be the entertainment. I want the competition and the structure and the format. But they're running entertainment because they're picking and choosing games based on entertainment value, not based on maximum competition.
I personally have always been okay with that.
Same here. I'm not necessarily against that.
It's just I just wish, like I said, anyway, I don't want to take up a whole hell of a lot of time about it, but I hope this signals some kind of change with MLG, that we don't have to have always a day and a half, 2 days of group play before we see any of these open bracket matches that are really good and deserve some attention. Like I said, Hindralisk and Sasquatch, and we would have missed a lot of QXC matches, things like that. So
I mean, all the people as well who say that the group stage is there, for the smaller players. It's fiction, because if you put them into a bracket, they've got more chance of making that big splash. Like generally over the group stage, the weaker players will get weeded out, which is why tournament organizers kind of have the group stage, because it means that when you go into your bigger days, the days when you want to be attracting viewers, you've got the absolute cream of the crop. But I'd like to see, why do we need group stages? Like 9 times out of 10, they're just a fucking distraction. Every caster I talk to says the hardest thing about their job is trying to make group stage matches, like really one-sided, exciting. Like they hate it, they hate having that extra day there. So I'm with you, man. Like fuck group stages, they're boring.
Well,
let's have an old-fashioned cup knockout format. Like,
there's different ways to do group. I mean, the way MLG did group before, I don't like that at all. But the way DreamHack does it, it actually does help the smaller players too.
Yes.
Because it guarantees that they play 3 matches. So,
I can agree. I can agree there.
They can break through, and that's the beauty of the different brackets of groups, right? Is that
I don't know though, because the thing with that, Chris, is let's say you have a group stage game and you beat some massive name player, you're a nobody, right? Yeah. Let's say I start playing StarCraft 2 and I beat a Korean randomly, and everyone's like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
What's this old dude doing? And then I lose my 2 games and I go out in the groups. No one's going to talk about that result in isolation. But if it happens within a bracket context, and all of a sudden you're like, oh well, he made it to the last 32, the last 16, that we all hold so dear in StarCraft 2. I think that's better than went out in groups.
No, but that's the thing. That's the thing, Richard. Like it's only a certain point you have to reach a certain point before you actually get credit for going far in a bracket. And so if you beat some Korean in the first round, you lose in the second round. There's no difference in that. I mean, in those two scenarios.
Agree though. I agree with Richard in that long context that in general it is better to have someone that is in the brackets and that performs in a bracket than in a group stage. I completely agree there, because you're right. People look at people that have beat people in groups and they're just like, it's one match, who gives a shit, and then he ended up losing anyway. That happens all the time. But I'm just going at it from MLG standpoint. I'm looking at their mindset, and I don't see them ever saying, let's just get rid of group play altogether. I don't ever see them saying that anytime soon.
I don't think they have to.
I mean, you have to think...
I don't think they have to either. So
yeah, you have to think of it from the standpoint of them having content too from the very consistent content from the tournament too. Having group play, again, like each player's going to play 3 matches, and you're going to have that many more matches to choose from to pick storylines that are developing as the group play is going too. Where the brackets, it's just like you have to make a decision before the actual brackets happen sometimes as to who's going to be on stage and who's, you know what I mean? It's actually harder from the standpoint of, I think, organizing and production.
I want to, if it's okay, I want to slightly change the subject real quick. Do you guys think, because of how well Polt did, both in personality and things like that, and I'm a big Polt fan. I was pulling for Polt this event.
Of course you're pulling for Polt. Come on.
It was a great event. It was a great event.
Team.
But,
I mean, Jesus.
But the well, not team, but yeah, but
You know what I mean.
but in general though, I do think. Do you guys think Hyun got a really bad rap? And like, for instance, Polt had. I've counted for the marketing reports. I like I think it was like 27 Reddit threads over the weekend. Hyun had maybe 2, none of which got top anything on Reddit.
Did he get a short end of a stick? Yeah, but that happens all the time. It's just like Nannywab DreamHack. I mean, we didn't hear anything about who he was playing the whole time he was making that deep run in the finals, right? I mean, he ended up playing it was FXO Linok, right? We didn't hear anything about Linok, right? When Nannywab was going through. That's okay though. I mean, I think that how you
I'm not
promote
sure
and
we can
market
change
it,
that too much either.
Yeah,
I think it really depends on the person.
It just makes me feel bad though, because
I mean, I love Hyun too, but
that's a good sign that maybe Quantic needs to step up their promotion and branding of their players.
It ain't just that though.
It's not just that, John.
It just goes to show how cheap.
No, but that's part of it.
It can be to like get yourself all that extra publicity in esports, man. Don't get me wrong, Paul's a cool guy and everything, but it's like that watching it for me, there felt an almost, dare I say it, contrived effort on his part to have this like bigger personality than usual.
Like
and
maybe
you know,
on doing it.
I'm not saying coach. Maybe he come
but...
with the realization himself, but I think it's a trend we're going to see happening with more Korean players. Put it that way. But
I have issue with that, Richard. Because
I think we're going to see it from all players.
Wait, hold on a second.
Yeah, and for all players in general. Yeah, absolutely.
I have an issue with that, Richard, because you're like bitching. Like one week we'll be bitching that Koreans don't have any damn personality, and then now you're going to chastise like Polt for actually showing personality.
No, he was just saying that it seemed contrived.
It didn't seem contrived to me, but I'm just
don't get me wrong. Look, it's great. It's great. Like let them all do it, right? But again, as long as it's a reflection of your real self, and maybe it is Polt, and maybe it
I
isn't.
thought it was.
But 4 times in person, and he's never acted that way. Now he does have some good coaching, some good management right now, and that makes a huge difference. And he was always a little bit more personable than a lot of the other guys. So you had to know that at some point he was going to come out of his shell a little bit. He was always kind of jovial, always had a smile on his face. So you knew that was there in him. But I would say, too, that this one felt from – and I did check out some YouTube stuff from it, that it did feel it may have looked a little contrived, but I think that was probably really Polt.
Well, what do you think, her? You know Polt, too. And the thing is that my dealings with Polt, like, he didn't speak English very well before, so I couldn't even interact with him that well before.
I don't personally know Polt, but what I do know is I was from being at home and talking to people like Andrew at the event and things like that. I don't think it was more of a contrived effort for his personality. If anything, it was more contrived with Reddit and some of the threads that came up on Reddit, because it did become a really big thing on Reddit, the Polt USA thing and stuff like that, and it kind of blew up. And it was my job here, to try to make it blow up.
Of course.
So then you're the reason that he was that.
No. I'm not the reason. No,
your question earlier about
Kurt's
how come it just seemed like Polt was getting a lot more attention? Well, it's because I was sitting behind the keyboard blowing it up.
But what I'm saying is and I'm not sure if that's necessarily a team fault thing, as far as if Quantic didn't do enough, or if that's more of just a community not looking more at that player than they possibly should. But either way,
I mean, let's be real. Like the Polt thing didn't blow up until he beat Nannywab, right? And when he beat Nannywab, it's Nannywab too. It's just that good and evil
Yeah,
to
oh
that
yeah.
story
blew up
line,
though,
so
too. It didn't matter. It blew up because of the personalities. The claws came out basically.
Yeah, I mean,
And there was real emotion in the game, something I've been advocating for 2 years in StarCraft, and we finally are starting to get it, and people are starting to take notice. Like, this is awesome.
no,
I love trash talking. I want to
yeah,
see.
let's talk about Polt calling out
See, I
Naniwa in
can I
that
can
interview
argue a little
too.
bit about that too, John, because I'm one of those people. I'm one of those people that's very very ardent about players shaking other players' hands at the end of games and things like that. And
Well,
the
I think you
reason,
absolutely should, but
yeah, and I mean, and look, I mean,
I-
you can kind of BM and bullshit around with him, but I like the fact that even at the end of all that, at the last game, Polt went up and tried to shake his hand. Now, despite it didn't go
Come
so
on.
well.
I mean, it
I mean,
was,
don't get me wrong. I'm in two minds about it because, like, obviously, I've played a lot of rugby, as you can tell by the fact I look like Frankenstein's monster. You know, and I do love the kind of ethos, which is, you know, 30 guys get onto a pitch, beat the shit out of each other. There's some vague connotation involving a ball where there's some sort of game going on. At the end of it, you all shake hands and you all have a beer, right? You walk down these tunnels. They make a massive thing out of it if you've never seen what happens at the end of a rugby game. You line up like this, and the opposite team walks through the tunnel, and you applaud them and shake their hand. That's the gentlemanly part of it. But equally, when I've been on the pitch, if someone's done something and, you know, you get the odd thumb in the eye or someone has a nibble on your ear, and I don't mean in a romantic fashion, you know, it's very hard to shake these guys' hand at the end of a game. You feel more inclined to want to punch them and to carry it on after the game is finished. But that's
it's purely
frowned upon.
ceremonial.
during
See, for
the
those
game,
things,
and shake their hand afterwards.
it's purely ceremonial. I mean, you don't mean to. You don't want to shake this guy's hand that you freaking hate. You're just doing it at a ceremony, right? And
But that's kind of like one of those things though that I think, like I said, I just think it's important because you have to deal with people that you don't fucking like all the time. You know, you have to deal with it. So,
I mean, let's be real.
But
Did
then
you
again,
actually
I don't necessarily want to shake their hands. I mean, I deal with assholes in esports all the time, and I'm sure there's lots of people in esports who think, you know, I'm an asshole. But if they come over and want to shake hands with me and, like, let's all be palsy-walsy because we're in the same building, fuck it. If it makes me an unprofessional dick to say, look, I don't want to be that fake.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
What if Cats came over and wanted to shake your hand?
well, he's never gonna do that.
No, what if he did? What if he did? What if he did? Let's bury the hatchet, buddy.
And I'd be a massive hypocrite if I accepted that handshake. Massive hypocrite. And I wouldn't be thinking it in my brain. My hand might be, you know, touching his hand, but my brain would be thinking, I still think you're an asshole. So what's the point?
Somebody's bringing up a good point. Is why did Twitter blow up about Naniwa not shaking hands, but
not Polt with the BM.
That's what That's what I'm telling you guys. I'm saying, like, did you really expect Naniwa to actually shake his hand when Polt? That's why I was saying Polt's a sly dog, because he, like, BM'd him 2 times going into that, and then he comes and tries to shake his hand. Of course he's not going to shake your hand.
No, what I'm bringing up is the hypocrisy of the community. It's so stupid because if they like a person, that person can do no wrong. But if they don't like someone,
it's more the don't like, actually, in this situation, I think.
What's that?
I think it's more the don't like in this situation.
Yeah, in this situation, it's because people just don't like Naniwa. So they saw his non-handshaking as kind of like, that was a dick move.
Story.
But
I also think a lot of people took it as, and it wasn't this, and Pope said this later in the interview, I think they took it as payback for an ST, which kind of made it sort of a bittersweet moment, you know? So
it was so long ago, though. Jeez, really?
Yeah, but a lot of
That's
people
crazy.
posted that on Reddit. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people thought that was what it was payback for an ST, because if you remember right, it was a really big thing.
That's some PR by his team management.
All I know is that the interview he gave was definitely the first in English that I've seen that was, you know, the one where he was just saying how BM Naniwa and it's just 2 BM and that sort of thing. I mean, that was definitely a first. I've never seen a Korean player do that. So I think Polt, you know, in general, right, there's this whole saving face and, like, don't putting, you know, just not disrespecting people in that manner and that sort of thing, especially in public. So, you know, seeing Polt do that just kind of, I don't know. I think it made a lot of people be able to relate to him a lot more than. the
I think it's a real shame though, in a way, that we have to have, like, it's great for the spectator's point of view, and you do it naturally when you watch any sport where you do divide people into good and evil. But I do think you need to have that sort of actual awareness. Before you go down that route. It's great for the 40 minutes that a game lasts, but then you need to step away from it. What happens in esports is people don't. And Naniwa's got this label, of being the bad guy. If esports had more people like fucking Johan at all levels, it would be a much better place. That's the reality. Because he's got a great work ethic. He's fucking honest. And he never bullshits. He never tries to present something he isn't. And when I talk about work ethic, man, this guy works unfucking believably hard to be as good as what he is. And he's overcome a lot of issues that I'm sure we'd talk about frankly if he were here to do that.
If you remember right, after Idra was cut from EG, people came out, and Idra's a different player, I know, but what I'm saying is the same type of persona. When Idra got cut from EG, people came out and said, Idra's the best player that I've ever worked with. If all the players that we work with were like Idra, it would be 10 times easier. I think, Boss from DreamHack said that, and I know Sundance said that. So,
Greg is not a bad. Like, he's a really nice guy. So it was just completely a persona. I mean, so the thing with Naniwa, and I think I agree with that, Richard. In the fact that I think we had more Naniwas. It would probably be a better place right now because Naniwa backs up his talk. You know what I mean? He's not trying to be a dick. That's just how he is. You know what I mean? He just doesn't want to deal with this kind of thing sometimes. And if he's the bad guy, he's the bad guy. But we need more bad guys, right? We don't have very many villains in there.
He's not even a bad guy. He's just a high maintenance prima donna.
Yeah, but relatively speaking, he's kind of the bad guy in the storylines that we're talking about. He's the good guy when we're talking DreamHack, and then he turns into the bad guy when we're talking.
I did an interview with him at one IEM where he said, he goes, people say I'm a prima donna and all that, but do you think the Koreans put up with stuff when it's not perfect? It's just they do it all privately because the tournament organizers are all sucking Korean dick. That's pretty much, the summation of it. And you know what? Having seen behind the scenes and behind that veil of what goes on, he's got a fucking point. All it takes is a Korean player's manager to come out and go, what's this? You can't expect my player to play with this. Shit gets changed. When it's a European player, they get told you got to muddle through because of their relevant status. So I love Johan for bringing attention to these things. And even though everyone around him, sponsors, managers, friends, whatever, everyone's telling him, no, just tone it down, don't say that. He never fucking does it. He's always true to himself, man. He's inspirational. People shouldn't be saying he's a dick 'cause he doesn't shake someone's hand. Someone should be saying he's a fucking legend for having the balls to know that he's going to get so